My wife, Sarah, and I have been married for 8 years. To say it's been perfect would be a lie, but we've always found ways to work through things. Or at least, that's what I thought. In the beginning, we were that couple everyone envied, always laughing, always in sync, always the life of the party. But like with most things, time changes people. Responsibilities pile up, work stresses take over, and life happens. I got promoted at work about a year ago, which meant longer hours and more travel. It wasn't ideal, but it was good for our future, or so I told myself. I guess in the back of my mind, I knew we'd been drifting apart. The once spontaneous date nights turned into Netflix and leftovers. Our conversations felt like routine check-ins rather than heart-to-heart talks. And sex? It happened, but not as often or as passionately as before. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed to be going through her own changes. She started going out more often, catching up with friends she hadn't seen in years, or so she said. At first, I didn't mind. We both needed our space. But something felt off. It was little things, you know? She was glued to her phone, laughing at messages I wasn't a part of, turning the screen away whenever I walked by. And the way she dressed when she went out? It wasn't the usual jeans and casual top. She looked like she was going to a nightclub, even if she claimed she was just grabbing a quick dinner with her girlfriends. I told myself not to worry. We were just going through a rough patch. Every couple does, right? I blamed myself for not being around more, for not being attentive enough. I started making more of an effort, planning weekend getaways, suggesting date nights, trying to bring back the spark. But she wasn't interested. There was always an excuse: too tired, too busy, not feeling well. I tried not to read into it, but my gut kept telling me something was wrong. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed. I glanced at it without really thinking. It wasn't snooping. At least, that's what I told myself. But then I saw the message. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. My stomach dropped. The text wasn't from one of her girlfriends. It was from a guy named Mike, someone I'd never heard of before. I should have confronted her right then and there, but I froze. My mind raced with a million questions. Was she cheating? Was this just a flirty message that didn't mean anything? I put the phone down and tried to act normal when she came out of the bathroom. She kissed me on the cheek, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything in my head, every late night she claimed to be with friends, every time she went out and came back just a little too late. The next morning, I decided to let it slide. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe I was overthinking things. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something was going on, and it wasn't good. In the weeks that followed, I became more suspicious. I started noticing patterns. She was always texting, but she never shared who she was talking to. She'd laugh at messages but wouldn't say what was so funny. When I asked her about her plans for the night, her answers were vague: just going out, or meeting a friend. And when I asked which friend, she'd brush it off, saying I wouldn't know them. But the biggest red flag? She started staying out later and later, sometimes not coming home until 2 or 3 a.m., always with some excuse about how she lost track of time or ran into an old friend. I felt like a fool, but I couldn't bring myself to confront her yet. I needed proof, something concrete. So, I started doing what no one wants to admit they've done: I checked her phone. I knew her passcode, and while she was asleep one night, I went through it. Messages, photos, calls, there was nothing incriminating. She must have deleted everything. But then I checked her email, and that's where I found it. Emails exchanged with Mike. They weren't explicit, but they were definitely flirty. Inside jokes, plans to meet up, little comments about how much fun they had last time. It wasn't enough to accuse her of cheating, but it was enough to drive me crazy. I started obsessing over every detail, every moment she spent on her phone, every time she left the house without telling me where she was going. It consumed me. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was what she might be doing behind my back. And then came the night I'll never forget. It was a Thursday night when everything came crashing down. Sarah had told me she was going out for drinks with a couple of her friends after work. At this point, I didn't even bother asking who she was meeting. The last few weeks had been unbearable, my mind constantly running through worst-case scenarios. I was living in a haze of suspicion, and every time she left the house, it felt like I was being punched in the gut. But tonight, something in me snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided I was going to follow her. I sat in the car outside our house, waiting. I'd been doing this for about an hour, feeling ridiculous and pathetic, but I didn't care. I had to know. Around 7:30, I saw her come out. She was wearing a tight black dress, the kind she hadn't worn in years, not for me, anyway. My heart raced as I watched her get into her car, her phone in hand, and start driving off. I followed from a distance, careful not to get too close. She drove across town to a bar I didn't recognize, parked, and got out. My palms were sweaty as I pulled over a few spots away, watching her every move. She walked into the bar like she was meeting someone special, that kind of energy you don't show unless you're excited to see someone. I sat there for a few minutes, my heart pounding in my chest. I almost chickened out, but I knew if I didn't do this now, I'd never forgive myself. I got out of the car and walked toward the bar. My nerves were shot, but my anger kept me moving. When I stepped inside, the smell of alcohol and cheap cologne hit me. The place was dimly lit, with a scattering of small groups huddled around tables. I scanned the room, and that's when I saw her. She was sitting at a table near the back, but she wasn't alone. There he was, Mike. Tall, dark hair, probably in his early 30s. He had this smarmy grin on his face as he leaned in toward her, clearly flirting. She was laughing, touching his arm in that familiar way that made my stomach turn. They were sitting way too close for this to be just a casual meeting between friends. My fists clenched at my sides, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had to be smart about this. I pulled out my phone and snapped a quick photo of the two of them. I needed proof. No more of this guessing game, no more paranoia. The picture was clear as day, Sarah and this asshole cozied up in a corner, looking like they were on a date. My hand was shaking as I hit the save button and slipped the phone back into my pocket. I didn't stick around to watch any more of it. I couldn't. Just seeing them together made me sick to my core. I turned and left the bar, feeling like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. It felt like I was in some twisted dream, like this couldn't actually be happening to me. But it was real. That photo in my phone was proof. My wife, the woman I'd spent nearly a decade with, was cheating on me right in front of my face. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to my face, telling me she was with friends or working late? My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought I might snap it in half. I was furious. But more than that, I was heartbroken. I'd loved her, trusted her, and this was how she repaid me? When I got home, the house felt cold and empty, like all the life had been sucked out of it. I dropped my keys on the table and just stood there, staring at nothing. The anger inside me was boiling over, but there was no one to take it out on. Sarah wouldn't be home for hours, and even when she did come back, she'd probably just lie again, like always. I sat down on the couch and opened my phone again, staring at the photo. The proof was right there. But what was I supposed to do with it? Confront her? Throw it in her face the moment she walked through the door? Part of me wanted to drive back to that bar and drag her out of there, scream at her in front of everyone, make a scene. But what good would that do? Instead, I just sat there, staring at the clock, counting the minutes until she came home. The rage I felt earlier started to shift into something colder, something more calculated. This wasn't going to end in a screaming match or some emotional breakdown. I was going to handle this my way. She finally came home around midnight. I heard her keys jingle in the lock, and my heart rate shot up. I didn't move from the couch, didn't say a word. She walked in, looking way too put together for someone who had just grabbed drinks with friends. She smiled at me, that fake smile she'd been using for months. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice casual, like everything was normal. Like she wasn't just out there with another man, laughing and flirting. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "How was your night?" She shrugged, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter. "Oh, just catching up with the girls. Same old stuff." She didn't even make eye contact. She was already walking down the hall to the bedroom, acting like nothing was wrong. Like I was some idiot who couldn't see what was right in front of me. I stayed on the couch, my blood boiling. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed to figure out what my next move was, how I was going to play this. Part of me wanted to storm into the bedroom, shove that picture in her face, and watch her squirm. But that wouldn't be enough. She'd probably just lie, come up with some bullshit excuse, try to play the victim. I needed more than just one confrontation. I needed to think bigger. So, I stayed quiet. I let her think she was getting away with it. But I knew, and now that I had that photo, the power had shifted. She had no idea what was coming. The next few days were pure hell. I could barely look at Sarah without feeling a mixture of disgust and rage. Every time she smiled at me, acted like everything was fine, it felt like a knife twisting deeper into my gut. I kept playing it cool, though. Pretending like nothing had changed, like I wasn't sitting on the evidence of her affair. But inside, I was unraveling. The nights were the worst. Lying in bed next to her, knowing she'd been with him, it was unbearable. I started staying up late, sitting in the living room with the TV on, but I wasn't really watching anything. I just couldn't be near her. She noticed, of course. One night, she came out of the bedroom, wrapped in a robe, and sat next to me on the couch. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice soft, pretending to care. "You've been so distant lately." The nerve of this woman. She was cheating on me, and now she had the audacity to play the concerned wife? It took every ounce of self-control not to snap right there. "I'm fine," I lied, my eyes glued to the TV. "Just work stress." She put her hand on my shoulder, that same hand that had probably been all over him, and it made my skin crawl. "You know you can talk to me, right? If something's bothering you?" I almost laughed. "Talk to you? About what?" "How you're screwing some guy behind my back." But I just nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I know." She gave me a small, concerned frown before leaning in to kiss me. It took everything in me not to recoil, but I let her do it. Let her keep playing her little game. She stood up, stretching with that same seductive energy she probably used with him. "Come to bed soon, okay?" "Yeah," I mumbled, watching her walk back down the hall to our bedroom. I stared at the TV, feeling the anger rising inside me again. I had to end this. I couldn't live like this, not for another day. The next morning, I decided it was time. I had waited long enough, collected enough evidence. The picture on my phone was just the beginning. Over the past few days, I'd been keeping tabs on her, checking her phone, looking at her emails whenever she left it unattended. It wasn't hard. She'd gotten comfortable, careless. There were messages, flirty emails, plans to meet up again. It was all there. She was still in the shower when I went through her phone one last time. I opened her messages with Mike, scrolling through their conversations. There it was, in black and white, plans for another night out, another night of lies. My hands were shaking as I took screenshots of everything and sent them to myself. There would be no denying it this time. She couldn't weasel her way out of this. When she came out of the bathroom, I was sitting at the kitchen table, my phone in hand, the screenshots pulled up and ready. She was in her usual rush, grabbing her bag, not even looking at me as she moved around the kitchen. "I'm running late. I'll see you tonight, okay?" she called out over her shoulder. "Sarah," I said, my voice calm but firm. "We need to talk." She froze for a second, her back still to me, before turning around slowly. "About what?" she asked, her tone a little too casual. But there was a flicker of something in her eyes. She knew. I stood up, walking over to her, my phone still in my hand. About this, I said, holding the phone up, showing her the messages. The color drained from her face instantly. What the hell is this? I asked, my voice rising as the anger I'd been holding back for days finally bubbled to the surface. Who the fuck is Mike? Her eyes went wide, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for an answer. But she didn't have one. Not a good one, anyway. Are you going to say something, or are you just going to stand there and lie to me again? I demanded, my heart pounding in my chest. The calm facade I had been holding onto was slipping. I was furious, and it was all pouring out now. It's not what you think, she started, her voice shaking, but I cut her off. Don't give me that bullshit. I snapped, stepping closer, holding up the phone again. I have the messages, Sarah. I know you've been seeing him. Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't buying it. Just let me explain. Explain what? I shouted. Explain how you've been sneaking around with some guy while I'm at work, busting my ass to give us a life? Explain how you've been lying to my face for months? What the hell is there to explain, Sarah? She looked desperate now, her hands trembling as she reached out toward me. I never wanted to hurt you. Hurt me? I laughed bitterly, stepping back. You didn't just hurt me, you fucking destroyed me. You've been living a lie, Sarah. Our whole marriage has been a lie. Tears were streaming down her face now, but I didn't care. She deserved this. She deserved every bit of pain she was feeling. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I shook my head, my jaw clenched. You didn't mean for it to go this far? Are you fucking kidding me? She opened her mouth to say something else, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. I'd heard enough lies from her. Tell me, I demanded, my voice cold and sharp. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, wiping her tears with the back of her hand, and for a second, I thought she might try to lie again. But then she looked down at the floor, defeated. A few months, she admitted quietly. It started a few months ago. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Months. She had been sneaking around for months, sleeping with this guy behind my back, acting like everything was fine. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger in check. Why? I asked, my voice low and trembling. Why did you do this? She didn't answer right away. She just stood there, staring at the floor like she was too ashamed to even look at me. Finally, she muttered, I was lonely. Lonely? I repeated, my voice incredulous. So instead of talking to me, instead of working on our marriage, you go and fuck some other guy? She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. She deserved to feel that sting. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore, she said through her tears. You were always busy, always working, and I felt so alone. You felt alone? I scoffed. You weren't alone, Sarah. You had me. I was right fucking here. She shook her head, sniffling. You weren't. Not really. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Maybe there was some truth to what she was saying, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook. So that makes it okay? I asked, my voice rising again. That makes it okay to cheat on me? To lie to me? No, she whispered, shaking her head again. No, it doesn't. I know that. I'm so sorry. Sorry? I snapped, laughing bitterly. Sorry doesn't cut it, Sarah. Sorry doesn't fix this. I turned away from her, running my hands through my hair, trying to calm down. My mind was racing, spinning out of control with everything that had just come crashing down around me. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it was all too much. When I turned back around, she was still standing there, her eyes red and swollen, her face pale. She looked like she had been broken, but that didn't matter to me. Not anymore. I want you out, I said, my voice cold and firm. She blinked, confused. What? I want you out of the house. Today. I didn't raise my voice this time. I didn't need to. The look in my eyes must have told her I wasn't bluffing. Please, she whispered, stepping toward me. We can fix this. No, we can't, I cut her off. You already destroyed it. She stood there for a moment, her mouth slightly open like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. There was nothing left to say. Without another word, she walked past me, into the bedroom. A few minutes later, I heard the door slam shut as she left the house. And just like that, everything we had built was gone. Once Sarah walked out that door, I didn't feel the rush of relief I thought I would. Instead, there was this gnawing emptiness. She was gone, but the betrayal was still there, burning inside me. I sat down on the couch, staring at the wall, replaying everything that had happened in my head. The anger started bubbling up again, hotter and more intense than before. She had ripped my life apart, lied to my face, and now she thought she could just leave, probably running back to Mike without a second thought. No. She wasn't going to get off that easy. Sarah might have walked out of our house, but I wasn't about to let her waltz back into her life like nothing happened. She needed to feel the consequences of what she had done. Not just with me, but with everyone who knew her. Her family, her friends, they all thought she was this perfect wife, the sweet and innocent woman who could do no wrong. Well, that was about to change. I opened my phone and stared at the photo I had taken at the bar, the one of her and Mike sitting way too close, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. It was perfect, the damning evidence that showed exactly what she had been up to behind my back. I could have confronted her with it earlier, but I had bigger plans now. I wasn't just going to end this quietly. I was going to blow up her entire world, just like she had done to mine. I spent the next hour compiling everything I had, the text messages, the flirty emails, the photos, all the little bits of proof I had gathered over the past few weeks. I made sure it was all in one neat folder, ready to go. And then I started making a list of people who needed to know. First on the list, her parents. Sarah's parents, Susan and John, adored her. She was their perfect little girl who could do no wrong. They'd always treated me kindly, but I knew they had a blind spot when it came to Sarah. I wondered how they'd react when they saw the real her. I pulled up Susan's contact in my phone and hesitated for a second. I mean, this was her mother. But then the image of Sarah with Mike flashed in my mind, and all the hesitation evaporated. She deserved this. She earned every bit of what was coming. I typed out a quick message. I thought you should see this. I know you've always trusted Sarah, but there's something you need to know about what she's been doing behind my back. I attached the photo of her and Mike together and hit send. It was done. The fuse was lit, and there was no going back now. Next, I went down the list, sending the same message to her brother, her best friend Jess, and a few other close friends who had been part of our lives for years. The same damn picture, each time, with a little variation of the message. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I wanted them to know exactly what kind of person Sarah really was. I knew it was only a matter of time before word spread, and she'd start getting bombarded with calls and texts from everyone. She'd have to explain herself, try to weasel her way out of it, but this time, she wouldn't be able to. I leaned back on the couch after hitting send on the last message, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction. She was probably out there right now, with him, completely oblivious to the bomb that was about to go off in her life. About 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. I looked down and saw it was Sarah's mom, Susan, calling me. I could only imagine the chaos on the other end of that line. My first instinct was to ignore the call, let her stew in the mess for a while, but I decided to pick up. Hello? I answered, keeping my voice as calm as possible. John, what the hell is going on? Susan's voice was frantic, confused. I just got your message. Is this some kind of joke? Please tell me this is a joke. I wish it was, I said, not bothering to mask the bitterness in my tone. But it's all real, Susan. Your daughter has been seeing another guy for months behind my back. That picture was taken just a few nights ago. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear Susan breathing heavily, like she was trying to process what I was saying. I don't believe it, she finally muttered. This doesn't make sense. Sarah would never do something like that. I laughed, a short, bitter laugh. Well, she did. And I've got more than just that picture to prove it. Why didn't you talk to us about this first? She asked, her voice starting to tremble. We could have figured something out. This isn't the way to handle it, John. Oh, I tried talking to her, I said coldly. But she's been lying to me for months. What was I supposed to do? Just sit back and let her get away with it? Susan didn't have an answer for that. She just mumbled something incoherent and hung up the phone. I knew she was probably calling Sarah right that second, demanding an explanation, but I didn't care. Let them sort through the wreckage together. Next came Sarah's brother, who sent me a simple text after seeing the photo. Is this real? Yes, it's real, I replied. She's been cheating on me for months. I didn't expect much of a response, and I didn't get one. He just sent back a quick sorry, man, before going silent. But I knew the damage had been done. He'd tell their parents, and they'd tell more people. That photo was going to circulate through her family like wildfire. Her best friend Jess, though, she had the most interesting reaction. She called me almost immediately after I sent the photo. John, what the fuck is going on? Jess said, skipping any pleasantries. Are you seriously spreading shit about Sarah? I was surprised by the tone. Jess and I had always gotten along, and I thought she'd at least understand where I was coming from. I'm not spreading shit, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I'm telling people the truth. But this, she snapped. This is how you handle it. Sending a photo to everyone? Jesus, John, that's fucked up. Fucked up? I shot back, my temper flaring again. What's fucked up is your best friend lying to me and cheating on me for months. I didn't do this. She did. There was a pause on the line. I could hear Jess breathing heavily on the other end. I don't know what's going on with her, she finally muttered, but this is just going to make everything worse. Good, I replied coldly. I want her to feel this. I want her to know what it feels like to have everything fall apart. Jess sighed. You don't understand, John. You're hurting yourself too. People don't forget this kind of stuff. I don't care, I said, cutting her off. I've already lost everything that matters. Jess was quiet for a moment, then she spoke in a softer tone. You need to calm down. This is all going to blow up. You can't take it back once it's out there. I don't want to take it back, I said, my voice firm. She deserves everything that's coming to her. I hung up the phone, not wanting to hear any more from Jess or anyone else. They could all go to hell for all I cared. Sarah had destroyed my life, and I was making sure everyone knew about it. I wasn't going to be the victim who quietly slinked away while she played the innocent wife. For the rest of the day, I sat there, waiting for the fallout. Sure enough, the messages started coming in. Some from mutual friends, asking what the hell was going on. Some from Sarah's family, begging me to stop. I ignored most of them. I didn't need their sympathy or their anger. I was done with all of them. By evening, I got a text from Sarah herself. Just 2 words, call me. I stared at the message for a long time before I finally responded, why? So you can lie to me again? A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. She was calling. I didn't hesitate. I picked it up. What the fuck are you doing, John? Her voice was panicked, on the verge of hysteria. Why are you sending that picture to my family? To my friends? Because you deserve it, I said calmly. You lied to everyone, Sarah. You lied to me. You don't get to just walk away from this like nothing happened. You've ruined everything, she screamed. I can't go anywhere now. My parents, my friends, everyone is calling me, asking what's going on. What did you think this would accomplish? I wanted you to feel what I felt, I replied, my voice cold. I wanted you to know what it's like to have your whole world shattered. There was silence on the other end. Then she let out a frustrated, defeated sigh. "You've really lost it, haven't you?" "Maybe I have," I said. "But at least now you can't pretend to be the victim." She didn't say anything for a while. I could hear her breathing heavily, probably trying to figure out what to say. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet and strained. "You've made your point. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry for everything." I didn't respond. Her apology meant nothing now. "John," she whispered. "Please, can we just talk? Just the two of us. Face to face." I thought about it for a second. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face forever. But the other part of me knew there was still more to say. "Fine," I muttered. "Come home. We'll talk." This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I sat there, staring at my phone after I agreed to meet Sarah. Her voice, that pathetic, defeated tone, it should have made me feel better. She was cornered, desperate to explain herself, to salvage whatever she could from the mess she created. But the truth was, her apology wasn't enough. No words could ever make up for what she did. The thought of her and Mike, laughing, touching, sneaking around while I was breaking my back to keep our life together, it made my blood boil. But this wasn't just about Sarah anymore. Mike had to pay too. He was just as guilty, if not more. He knew she was married. He knew exactly what he was doing. I wasn't going to let him off the hook that easily. He needed to feel the consequences of this. He needed to understand what it meant to ruin someone's life. I started digging through Sarah's messages again, scrolling through every flirty text, every "I can't wait to see you" that made me want to smash my phone into the wall. I found what I was looking for, his phone number. I saved it, knowing exactly what I was going to do next. Mike wasn't some random guy Sarah met on Tinder or at a bar. He worked with her, at the same company. That's how it started, innocent work conversations that led to lunches, then late-night drinks, then, eventually, him fucking my wife. I wanted to find out more about him, so I did a little digging. Thanks to social media, it wasn't hard. His profile was filled with pictures of him at company events, out with friends, trying to show off his charming personality. What a joke. I clicked through his photos, looking for any sign of weakness, something I could use. And there it was. He wasn't married, but he had a girlfriend. I found a picture of them together, smiling at some vacation spot, holding hands like they were the perfect couple. I felt that twisted sense of satisfaction again. Perfect. He wasn't just some single asshole going after married women, he was living a double life too. I decided that his girlfriend needed to know who she was dating. I pulled up the photo of Mike and Sarah again, the one I'd taken at the bar, and attached it to a message. "Just thought you should know what Mike has been up to. He's been having an affair with my wife. Here's a photo of them together." I hit send and leaned back, feeling that dark satisfaction settle in again. She was going to get the same gut punch I got. She'd confront him, tear his world apart just like Sarah had done to mine. But I wasn't done with Mike. Sending that message to his girlfriend wasn't enough. I needed to make sure he knew this wasn't something he could walk away from. I opened his number and sent him a text. "We need to talk. Meet me at the bar where I caught you with my wife. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Don't make me come find you." I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. He'd be there, or he'd regret it. The next day, I felt a strange calmness wash over me. I went about my day as if nothing was wrong, even though everything had already fallen apart. I wasn't thinking about Sarah's pathetic attempt at reconciliation. All I could focus on was that meeting with Mike. I spent the day picturing how it would go down, how I'd confront him, make him feel the same shame and fear that I'd felt when I saw him with her. When the clock hit 7:30, I grabbed my jacket and headed out. I wasn't nervous. In fact, I was more collected than I'd been in weeks. It was like everything was leading to this moment. I got to the bar a little before 8 and sat in the back, in the same spot where I'd taken that picture of them. The irony wasn't lost on me. I ordered a drink and waited, my eyes on the door. About 15 minutes later, I saw him. Mike walked in, looking around nervously. He spotted me and hesitated for a second, but then he made his way over. His face was pale, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. Good. He sat down across from me, his shoulders tense. John, he said quietly, his voice shaky. Listen, I'm sorry about. Shut up, I cut him off. I don't want your fucking apology. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room like he was looking for an escape route. I leaned in, my voice low and steady. You think you can just screw someone's wife and get away with it? I didn't mean for any of this to happen, he stammered. It just happened. I didn't know you, I didn't mean to hurt you. Oh, you didn't mean to hurt me? I laughed bitterly. Well, you did. You fucked my wife for months, and now you want to sit here and pretend like it was some kind of accident? I'm sorry, he repeated, his voice trembling. I really am. I stared at him for a long time, my anger bubbling just below the surface. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice cold and calm. You're going to quit your job. You're going to disappear from her life. If I ever see you near Sarah again, I'll make sure you regret it. Understand? His eyes widened, and he nodded quickly. Yeah, okay. I'll quit. I'll stay away. I swear. I could see the fear in his eyes, and it gave me a sick sense of satisfaction. But I wasn't done. I've already sent the photos to your girlfriend, I added, watching his face drain of color. I'm sure she'll be thrilled to know what kind of man she's dating. He didn't say anything. He just sat there, staring at me like a deer caught in headlights. You destroyed my marriage, I said quietly, leaning in closer. You don't get to walk away from this without consequences. He opened his mouth to say something, but I stood up before he could get a word out. Remember what I said. Quit your job. Stay away from her. If I ever see you again, it won't end with a conversation. With that, I walked out of the bar, leaving him sitting there, trembling and pale. I didn't look back. He wasn't worth it. As I drove home, I felt an odd sense of closure. Mike was out of the picture. Sarah had no one left to turn to. I had exposed them both, shattered their worlds just like they had shattered mine. But there was still one final confrontation to come. Sarah was coming back, and we were going to have the last conversation. The one that would decide everything. I got home after my meeting with Mike and sat in silence for a while. The satisfaction I felt earlier was starting to fade, replaced by a sense of finality. There was no going back after everything I'd done. The photo was out there, her family knew, her friends knew, and now, Mike knew exactly what I was capable of. There was only one thing left to deal with, Sarah. She texted me earlier, saying she'd be coming over that evening to talk, to explain herself. I wasn't interested in her explanations. I didn't need her excuses or fake apologies. I wanted to close the book on this chapter of my life for good. But I knew that this conversation was inevitable. We needed to talk about the one thing that would end this nightmare for good, divorce. It was around 7 p.m. when I heard the door open. Sarah walked in, looking like she had aged 10 years overnight. Her eyes were swollen, probably from crying, her hair a mess, and she was wearing the same clothes she had on earlier. The confident, flirty woman I'd caught with Mike was gone. In her place stood someone who looked completely broken. But it was too late for sympathy. She stood in the doorway, clutching her purse, eyes darting around the room like she didn't know where to begin. John, she started, her voice shaky. I don't even know what to say. Then don't say anything, I replied coldly, not looking up from my seat on the couch. I didn't even offer her a seat. Let her stand there and squirm. She took a deep breath and stepped further into the room. I know you're angry, she said, her voice wavering. And you have every right to be. I messed up, I know that. But I want to try and fix this. Please, John, just let me explain. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Fix this? You think you can just walk in here and fix what you destroyed? Sarah, there's nothing left to fix. She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered, her voice breaking. I was lonely, John. You were always gone, always working, and I felt so abandoned. There it was again. The same excuse she used the other day. She was going to try to make this my fault. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my temper in check. Lonely? I repeated, my voice low. So, you were lonely, and the solution was to fuck another man? She didn't respond, just stood there, tears welling up in her eyes again. I could see she wanted to argue, to defend herself, but there was no defense for what she had done. I worked my ass off for us, Sarah, I said, my voice rising. Everything I did was for us. For our future. And this is how you repay me? By sneaking around with some guy from work? Did you even stop to think about what you were doing? Or did you just not give a damn? I did think about it, she shot back, her voice cracking with desperation. Every time I did it, I felt horrible. But I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. We were so disconnected, John. I felt like I was losing you. Her words stung, but I wasn't about to let her flip this around. You were losing me? You've got some nerve, Sarah. I was right here. You were the one who checked out. You were the one sneaking around behind my back. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably now. I know I messed up. But I love you, John. I do. Please, can't we just... Stop, I said sharply, cutting her off. You don't get to say that anymore. You don't love me. If you did, you wouldn't have done this. She wiped her eyes, trying to steady herself. I made a mistake, she whispered. A huge mistake. But can't we just try? We've been through so much together. We've built a life together. I can't just throw that all away. I stood up from the couch, my patience worn thin. You didn't just make a mistake, Sarah. You made a series of decisions. You chose to lie to me. You chose to betray me. Over and over again. 4 months. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. She stood there, silent, tears streaming down her face. There was nothing left for her to say. She knew it was over, but she was too afraid to admit it. We're done, Sarah, I said, my voice calm but final. I've already contacted a lawyer. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. No, she whispered. Please, don't do this. It's already done, I said, walking past her toward the door. You made this choice when you decided to sleep with him. I'm just making it official. She collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I felt a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, but I quickly pushed it down. This wasn't my fault. She had done this to herself. Is this what you want? She cried, her voice muffled by her hands. To just throw everything away? All the years we spent together, everything we've been through, you're just going to end it like this? I turned around, my jaw clenched. You ended it, Sarah. The moment you decided to cheat on me, our marriage was over. I'm just cleaning up the mess you made. She looked up at me, her face red and swollen from crying. What about counseling? What about trying to fix this? We could go to therapy, work through it together. I shook my head. I'm not going to therapy with someone who spent months lying to me. I don't want to fix this, Sarah. I don't want to be with someone who could do what you did. But I love you, she sobbed, her voice breaking. I don't want to lose you. I stood there, staring at her, feeling nothing but emptiness. You already lost me. The words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She crumpled onto the couch, her body shaking with sobs. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered all the nights she spent with Mike, all the lies she told me, and the pity evaporated. "I'll have my lawyer contact you," I said, turning toward the door. "You can keep the house. I don't want anything to do with it." She didn't respond. She just sat there, broken, defeated, unable to face the reality of what she had done. As I walked out of the house, the door clicking shut behind me, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was finally over. The marriage, the lies, the betrayal, it was all behind me now. But the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There was still the divorce, the paperwork, the painful process of untangling our lives. But I was ready. I was ready to move on, to start over, to rebuild. Sarah would be a chapter in my life that I would never forget, but she was no longer part of my future. That part of my life was over. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away, not looking back. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I had thought that walking away from Sarah and filing for divorce would bring me some kind of peace, but the reality was far more complicated. As much as I wanted to be rid of her, the legal process was long and drawn out. Every day, I had to deal with the divorce papers, meetings with my lawyer, and emails from Sarah's lawyer trying to negotiate some kind of settlement. It was exhausting, but I kept telling myself it would be worth it in the end. Freedom was within reach, but it felt like it was taking forever. Sarah had tried to reach out a few more times after that last conversation. She sent me long, rambling texts about how she was sorry, how she missed me, how she didn't want things to end like this. But I ignored her. I didn't see the point in responding. There was nothing left to say, no point in dragging this out longer than it had to be. My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Carol, was handling everything, and I trusted her to get me through it. About a month into the process, I got the email I had been waiting for. Carol told me that Sarah had finally agreed to the terms of the divorce. She would keep the house, and we'd split our savings. No alimony, no messy battles over assets, just a clean break. It was exactly what I wanted. I read the email twice, feeling a strange mixture of relief and finality wash over me. This was it. The end of my marriage. Carol arranged for us to meet at her office to sign the final papers. I wasn't looking forward to seeing Sarah again, but I knew it had to be done. When I walked into the office, Sarah was already there, sitting at the table with her lawyer. She looked terrible, her eyes were bloodshot, and she had lost weight. She glanced up at me when I walked in, but I didn't return the look. I couldn't. There was nothing left between us except the signatures on those papers. We sat down, and Carol went through the documents with us, explaining the terms one last time. Sarah's lawyer, some younger guy who looked like he was fresh out of law school, said a few words about how they had tried to make things fair. I didn't care. I just wanted it to be over. When the papers were finally in front of me, I picked up the pen, my hand steady, and signed my name at the bottom. It was done. The divorce was final. I didn't look at Sarah. I didn't want to see whatever was written on her face. Guilt, sadness, regret, it didn't matter. We were officially done. I stood up, nodded to Carol, and left the room without saying a word. I walked out of the building, the cold air hitting me as I stepped onto the street. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the weight of the last few months slowly lift off my shoulders. It was a strange sensation. I had imagined that I would feel some kind of overwhelming relief, maybe even happiness, but what I felt instead was emptiness. It was like a chapter had closed, but there was no joy in it. Just a quiet, hollow feeling. I drove home, not to the house I shared with Sarah, but to the small apartment I had rented after I left. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom place with the basics, but it was mine. No memories of Sarah, no reminders of what had happened. Just a blank slate, which was exactly what I needed. I spent the next few days adjusting to the fact that I was now officially single. It was strange at first. For years, my identity had been wrapped up in being Sarah's husband, and now that was gone. I had to figure out who I was without her. I started working out more, getting back into hobbies I had abandoned during the marriage. I even reconnected with a few old friends, people I hadn't seen in years because I had been too focused on keeping my marriage together. But even as I started to rebuild my life, the anger lingered. I thought about Mike, about Sarah, about everything they had done behind my back. I thought about how easily she had lied to me, how she had pretended that everything was fine while she was sneaking around with him. That anger, that sense of betrayal, it was still there, simmering just below the surface. One night, I was sitting on the couch, flipping through the channels, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I even wanted to read what she had to say. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. "John, I know we've already signed the papers, but I just want to say I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I know I can never make up for what I did, but I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. I was confused, lonely, and I made terrible choices. I hope one day you can forgive me." I stared at the message for a long time, my mind spinning. Forgive her? After everything she had done? After all the lies, the cheating, the betrayal? I didn't know if I could. Or if I even wanted to. But the truth was, holding on to the anger was exhausting. It had consumed me for months, and now that the divorce was finalized, I realized that if I didn't let go, it would continue to eat away at me. I had to move on. Not for her, but for me. I had to find a way to let go of the past, or it would keep dragging me down. I didn't reply to Sarah's message. I didn't need to. Instead, I deleted it and blocked her number. She was part of my past now, and I was done living in that past. It was time to look forward. In the weeks that followed, I focused on myself. I got back into shape, threw myself into work, and started making plans for the future. I wasn't ready to date again, not yet, but I knew that eventually, I would be. Eventually, I would meet someone who wouldn't betray me, someone who wouldn't take me for granted. But for now, I was content being on my own. The divorce had left its scars, but I was healing. Slowly, but surely. Every day, the anger faded a little more, replaced by a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I was free. Free from Sarah, free from the lies, free from the pain. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Life was moving forward, and so was I. The end of my marriage wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new one. And this time, I was writing it on my own terms.